My name is Cassidy Ray. I'm 29 years old, and this is a story I never thought I'd tell. Not because it's unbelievable, if anything, it's too real, but because silence became my habit. Until one night, I broke it. He slapped me in front of my father. Just one loud, hot, stinging slap across my face. And my dad, he didn't say a word. He blinked, looked at the TV, and changed the channel. And then my husband laughed. He looked me dead in the eye and said, "No one's coming to save you." But that night, when the house was dark and still, I went to the garage. And when I came back, he was already on his knees, trembling. Before I take you into the heart of what happened, let me know, where are you watching from tonight? Have you ever felt abandoned in a room full of people? Don't forget to like, subscribe, and follow along. This story may be mine, but the silence? It's far too common. Shall we begin? If you had asked me back then, I would have told you Marcus saved me. We met when I was 24, during one of the loneliest years of my life. I had just dropped out of college, halfway through my marketing degree, because my mom's cancer had taken a turn. Stage 4. Nothing the doctors said made sense to me except for the word time, and how little of it we had left. Marcus worked in the office down the hall from the nonprofit where I'd taken a temp job to pay the bills. He was 5 years older, worked in finance, always wore a tie, always had his hair slicked back with just the right amount of effort. I first noticed him not because of how he looked, but how he treated the janitor. He always said hello. He always used people's names. The first time he really spoke to me was when a client at work yelled at me for misfiling a document. I hadn't, but that didn't matter. I stood there shrinking into myself while this older man belittled me like I was a child. Marcus walked past, paused, and said, "That's enough, sir. She's doing her job." After that, things moved quietly but fast. Coffee breaks, lunch walks, late-night texts when I was at the hospital with Mom. He'd say things like, "You shouldn't have to do this alone." And I believed him. I wanted to believe him. I was exhausted, overwhelmed, and no one, not even my father, seemed to know what to say to me anymore. My dad, he's always been a man of few words. Grew up on a farm, worked construction most of his life, always wore jeans to church. He loved my mom, I think, in his own hard-edged way. But once she died, something shut down in him. I was 20 then, still clinging to what was left of home. He stopped asking where I was going, stopped looking up when I walked into the room, and when I told him I was seeing someone, his only response was, "Just don't bring trouble into this house." Marcus wasn't trouble, at least not then. He was a warm blanket I could pull over the cracks in my life. He'd show up with takeout when I hadn't eaten, rub my shoulders while I cried. He helped me revise my resume, even walked with me into my first interview after a year-long gap on my record. I got the job, entry-level marketing assistant, and when I walked out of that building, he was waiting across the street, smiling, holding flowers. We moved in together 6 months later. The apartment was nothing special. Tiny kitchen, slanted floors, but we made it ours. We painted the walls light gray and danced barefoot to old records, drinking boxed wine like it was champagne. I remember one night, he held my hand and said, "Cass, when we're ready, I want us to have 2 kids. A boy and a girl. Like balance, you know?" He said it so simply, like a man who had thought about it deeply. I married him the following spring. White dress, courthouse ceremony, my dad standing stiff in the corner, nodding once when I looked at him for approval. He didn't smile, didn't object, just stood there, silent, like always. The early months of our marriage were quiet and easy. Marcus liked his eggs over easy and his coffee black. I liked mine scrambled and filled with cheese, with way too much cream in my mug. We'd argue over radio stations, fight playfully about where to eat, and end most nights with him pulling me onto the couch while some documentary hummed in the background. To everyone around us, we looked like a dream team. He'd open the door for me in public, hold my hand in front of his friends, talk about our marriage like it was the best decision he'd ever made. And honestly, I believed him. I believed we were special, that we'd figured something out early in life that other couples took decades to learn. There was this one weekend I'll never forget. We went hiking up in Sedona. The air was crisp, the rocks impossibly red, the sun warm but not harsh. We brought a picnic, and halfway through eating sandwiches on a blanket, Marcus turned to me and said, I don't think I've ever been this happy. That day, I took a picture of him with the sun behind him. His smile looked real. I saved that photo for a long time, long after things started to change, because I needed to believe that moment had happened, that it was once true. At night, lying next to him, I'd trace the shape of his shoulder with my fingers and think, I did it. I found the one person who'll never leave me. He'd pull me in close and whisper, You're my whole world, Cassidy Ray. You know that, right? And I did know. I felt it in my bones. I carried it like armor. Because for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like a burden. I didn't feel alone. I had Marcus, and Marcus had me. I used to tell people he's the only one who ever stood up for me. Even my own father never did that. I held on to that truth like a lighthouse. It guided me, it gave me hope. But lighthouses don't follow you when the tide rises. And I was about to learn just how far that tide could go. I think the shift was so subtle at first, I didn't even recognize it as a shift. It started with little things, like the way Marcus began double-checking my calendar. He'd casually ask, You said your meeting ends at 4, right? So why did you come home at 5:30 yesterday? I'd explain, there was traffic, someone stopped me on the way out, I ran into my old professor, but he never quite believed me. His silence after my answers always felt heavier than any accusation. Then came the jokes. You used to dress nicer, he said one morning as I pulled on jeans and a cardigan for work. Remember when you used to wear lipstick and actually try? I laughed nervously, brushing him off, but something twisted in my chest. That day, I looked at myself in the office bathroom mirror longer than usual. My cheeks were puffier than I remembered, my eyes tired. I hadn't slept well in weeks. The new project at work was overwhelming, and I'd been skipping breakfast, surviving off coffee and late dinners. One night, he picked at the meal I cooked. This chicken's dry, he muttered. I said nothing, just watched as he scraped his plate clean anyway, then left the kitchen without a thank you. A few days later, I got a text from my coworker Jamie asking if I wanted to grab lunch with the team. I smiled at the invitation. It had been weeks since I'd gone out during work hours. But when I told Marcus that night, his face hardened. Jamie? That guy you mentioned last month? Yeah, he's harmless, Marcus. It's just lunch, with the whole team. He didn't yell. He didn't argue. He just said, You should probably stop giving people the wrong idea. That night, he handed me a new phone, said the old one was outdated. Better security, he claimed. When I turned it on, I realized all my contacts had been erased. I asked him why. Fresh start, he smiled, kissing my forehead. I felt my stomach churn, but I said nothing. One evening, I stayed late at work helping a client meet a deadline. I texted Marcus at 5:15, said I'd be home a little late. At 6:00, I finally pulled into our driveway, exhausted and a little tense, but relieved to be home. The front door wouldn't open. I rang the bell once, twice, no answer. I knocked louder, pressing my ear to the door. Nothing. I called him, straight to voicemail. 20 minutes later, I sat in my car, hands shaking. The lights inside the house were on. He was home. At 6:45, the door finally opened. He stood there, arms crossed. You said you'd be back by 5, he said flatly. I texted, You could have called. He didn't speak to me for the rest of the night. I remember lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, trying to hold back tears. I kept thinking, what did I do so wrong? But by morning, he had coffee waiting on the counter and a small bouquet of lilies on the kitchen table. I'm sorry, he said, rubbing my shoulders. I just worry about you. I don't want anything to happen. He kissed the side of my face, lingering, and I felt myself soften. Maybe he was just worried. Maybe he didn't know how to express it properly. Maybe he was just broken, and broken things could be fixed. That's what I told myself. I started leaving work early, turning down lunch invitations, coming home right on time every day. I began tracking my commute down to the minute. I cooked more. I watched YouTube videos about meal prepping. I started setting the table the way he liked. Fork on the left, napkin folded neatly, no sauces left out, but nothing ever seemed quite good enough. When I made his favorite dish, he'd complain that it was too salty. If I wore makeup, he'd say I was trying too hard. If I didn't, he'd say I looked tired. He'd ask me why I didn't work out more, point out how my jeans fit differently, offer to buy me a gym membership. I started changing in the bathroom just so I wouldn't catch his expression as I undressed. Then there was sex. Sometimes it felt like apology, sometimes like punishment. Either way, it always left me feeling lonelier than before. Still, he had his sweet moments. He'd bring home a bottle of wine and suggest a movie night. He'd curl up next to me on the couch and whisper, "You're everything to me, Cass. I just want us to be solid. You get that, right?" I wanted so badly to believe it. I wanted to hold on to those moments like lifelines. And I began to defend him, to myself, to others. When Marley Beth, my best friend since high school, asked me why I never answered my phone anymore, I said, "Oh, Marcus just thinks I get too distracted. He's helping me focus on quality time." When she asked why she hadn't seen me in months, I laughed it off. Things have just been hectic. You know how marriage is. She gave me a look I didn't quite know how to interpret, concern wrapped in restraint. I brushed it off. Because I couldn't handle the idea that someone else might see the cracks. Even I wasn't ready to face them. I used to look at other couples, holding hands in grocery stores, laughing at inside jokes at restaurants, and think, we're just going through a phase. Every couple has one. Ours just looks a little different. I told myself that love was about compromise, that relationships were hard, that Marcus loved me in his own intense, passionate way. And besides, he'd stood up for me once, back when I felt invisible. He'd helped me through my mom's death, helped me find work, helped me find my footing. I owed him that much, right? I didn't see then that love isn't supposed to feel like owing someone your silence. But I would. I would soon. It didn't take much anymore. Not for Marcus to snap. A spoon too much salt in the mashed potatoes. A buffering signal during the game. A shirt he thought I hadn't folded right. His fuse had become shorter than a whisper, and I never knew what might light it. One Thursday evening, I served him dinner, grilled chicken with rice and green beans. He took one bite, chewed slowly, and then spit it out into his napkin. "You trying to poison me?" he muttered. I blinked. "What? This tastes like a goddamn salt mine." I opened my mouth to respond, but he stood up so suddenly, his chair scraped loudly against the floor. I flinched. I asked for one thing, and you screw it up. He grabbed his glass of water and threw it at the wall. The sound of it shattering filled the entire house. A shard flew back toward me, grazing my wrist. Thin, red, immediate. He didn't look at me, just stormed out of the kitchen, leaving the mess behind. I cleaned up with trembling hands, barely noticing the blood on the paper towel until it soaked through. 2 weeks later, I was watching a show on the living room couch, my legs tucked under me, trying to enjoy a few quiet moments while he was working in the garage. He came in and asked where the remote was. I pointed to the armrest. "It's right," but he was already yanking my hair, pulling me up off the couch with so much force, I gasped. "You were sitting on it," he growled. "You saw it and didn't say anything." I screamed, more from shock than pain. He dragged me down the hallway into our bedroom and shoved me inside. The door slammed behind me and locked. I sat on the floor for 2 hours. No water, no phone, just the echo of his footsteps pacing the hallway outside. Eventually, the door opened. He stood there, calm again. "I just need you to stop messing with me," he said. "Why do you push me like that?" I didn't answer. I walked past him, head down, and went straight into the bathroom. I ran the tap until I couldn't hear anything else. I wanted to call someone, Marley Beth, my aunt, even a hotline. But I didn't, because I felt stupid. I imagined what they'd say. "Why didn't you leave sooner? How could you let it get this far? Are you really that weak?" So I said nothing. At work, I smiled. I laughed at lunch. I delivered results, made deadlines, even helped organize the quarterly fundraiser. But there was one afternoon, after a long team meeting, when I slipped into the women's restroom and caught sight of myself in the mirror. The purple shadow just beneath my collarbone. The dry tear tracks on my cheeks I hadn't realized were there. I stared at myself for a long time. My reflection looked like a stranger. My eyes, once bright and curious, now dull, wary. And then I broke. I cried. Hard. Muffled sobs into my hands. Shoulders shaking, knees locking just to keep me from falling. After maybe 10 minutes, I wiped my face, fixed my eyeliner, tucked the pain away like it was something I could fold up and hide in my purse, and I went back to my desk. At home, I stopped initiating anything, conversation, plans, intimacy. I moved like a ghost. He noticed, of course, but twisted it into something else. "You're so cold lately," he said. "Are you cheating on me?" I wanted to laugh or scream or both. Instead, I just shook my head. My father visited twice that season, once for Thanksgiving, once for a random Sunday supper. Both times, Marcus was the perfect host. He opened the door with a smile, poured drinks, complimented my dad's old fishing stories. He even did the dishes after dinner, drying each plate like he'd been raised in a Norman Rockwell painting. My dad never suspected a thing. He thought I looked tired, but I blamed work. He thought Marcus seemed intense, but I said he was passionate. He asked if we were happy, and I lied. After all, what could I say? That my husband sometimes held my arm too tight? That he liked to corner me in the hallway and demand I apologize for things I didn't do? That he whispered threats between kisses? Would my father even believe me? He'd never been the comforting type. He never hugged me growing up. Never told me he loved me, not out loud. Mom used to say he wasn't raised with softness, so he didn't know how to show it. I wondered if maybe I'd married the same kind of man, just meaner. One night, after Marcus had thrown my phone across the room for texting a coworker about a presentation, I sat outside on the porch in the dark. I didn't have a plan. I didn't pack a bag. I just walked outside and sat, and I thought, I could go. I could stand up, get in my car, drive to Marleybeth's, and never come back. But before I moved, the porch light flicked on. Marcus stood there, barefoot, arms crossed, eyes red. "If you walk out that door," he said quietly, "I swear to God I'll kill myself." The air left my lungs. He didn't yell. He didn't threaten me directly. But his words hit me like a brick. I froze. Then I walked back inside. He held me that night like he hadn't in months, pressed his face into my neck, mumbled about being broken, about not knowing why he said what he said. "I don't want to lose you, Cass," he whispered. "You're all I have." And once again, I stayed. Because I didn't want to be the reason someone ended their life. Because I didn't want blood on my hands. Because I thought, maybe love means saving someone who doesn't know how to save themselves. But I was wrong. Love doesn't live in locked bedrooms and shattered glass, and I was getting dangerously close to forgetting that. It was a bitter Saturday in January, one of those gray, heavy-skied days where the cold settled in your bones and refused to leave. The wind had stripped the trees bare weeks ago, and the streets outside were quiet, dusted with slush and old salt. My father had called the night before, asking if he could drop by for a visit. It was unexpected. He rarely came without a reason. But I said yes. Part of me hoped his presence might create a kind of buffer, a reminder to Marcus that someone else still cared about me, even if he couldn't show it himself. That morning, Marcus was already in a mood. His boss had called him the night before about a missed deadline. Nothing major, just a spreadsheet that hadn't been updated. But Marcus took it personally. Said he was being micromanaged, disrespected, set up to fail. I tried to listen, to soothe him, to say all the right things. But every word felt like walking on broken glass. Before my dad arrived, Marcus sent me to the store with a very specific request. Craft beer from a brewery 2 towns over. The kind only 3 stores carried and usually sold out by noon. I told him I might not be able to find it, but I'd try. I went to 2 stores. They were out. I bought something similar, same style, different label. I even picked up his favorite snacks, hoping it would soften the blow. When I walked through the door with the bag in my hands, I could already feel it. That tightness in the air, the kind of tension you can't name but can't ignore. Marcus took one look at the box in my hands and narrowed his eyes. "That's not what I asked for." "I know," I said carefully, setting it down on the counter. "They were sold out everywhere. I got the closest thing I could." He didn't respond. Instead, he turned away and walked into the living room, where my dad was already sitting on the couch, sipping black coffee and watching a hunting documentary. He gave me a slight nod as I walked in, no smile, no real warmth, but it was more than I'd gotten in weeks. I started setting up snacks on the side table. Pretzels, cheese cubes. I moved slowly, trying not to draw attention. My heart beat fast for no reason I could justify. And then I heard Marcus behind me. "I asked for one damn thing, Cassidy," he said, voice low but sharp. "One thing." I straightened up, trying to keep my voice calm. "I told you they were sold out. I went to 2 stores. He stepped closer. "And you didn't think to call me? To check?" "There wasn't time," I said quietly, still facing the counter. "Dad was already on his way." "I don't care about your dad." That's when I turned around. Marcus, please, not now. His hand moved before I even registered it. A sharp, open palm slap across my left cheek. The sound was loud. Not just a crack, but a whip through the quiet of the room. I stumbled sideways, the force catching me off balance. My lower back slammed into the corner of the counter, hard. I gasped, reaching for something to steady myself, but my hand caught only air. Silence. Thick. Endless. Dreadful. I looked toward my father. He had paused the TV. He was staring at me, at the redness blooming across my face, at the way I clutched the counter to stay upright. For one brief, flickering moment, I thought he might stand up, speak, say something. But he didn't. He just blinked. And then he pressed play. The show resumed. The sound of a narrator talking about elk migration filled the space between us. Marcus let out a short, sharp laugh. He looked down at me and said, "See, no one's coming to save you." And that was the moment I broke. Not from the slap, not from the pain in my back or the ringing in my ear, but from the silence, from the fact that the one man I thought might step between me and the storm just sat back down and watched it roll through. I didn't say a word. I didn't cry. I stood up straight, walked to the bedroom, and closed the door. I didn't lock it. I didn't hide. I just lay down on the bed and curled into myself. I stared at the ceiling, my skin still hot from the slap, my spine throbbing, and something inside me shifted. Something old and rusted and tired, cracked wide open. I didn't cry. There was no point. The girl who used to believe people changed, who used to think endurance was strength, who used to measure love and how much pain she could survive, that girl was gone. She didn't make a sound when she left, but I felt it. For the first time in years, I was empty. And in that emptiness, I found space. The house was silent, not peaceful, not still, just silent. That kind of silence that seeps into your bones and makes every creak of the floor feel like a scream. My father had left without a word. The front door had closed softly behind him, followed by the hum of his truck fading into the cold night. Marcus had passed out on the couch, half-empty beer bottle still in his hand, remote resting on his chest. The TV was playing some late-night rerun. I don't remember what show. All I remember was the blue glow on his face and the soft wheeze of his breath. I stood at the hallway entrance for a long time, just staring, not at him, at what was left of myself. Then I turned and walked to the garage. The air shifted the second I stepped in, colder, denser. The smell of oil, rust, and dust hung thick in the air. A single yellow bulb flickered overhead, casting shadows across boxes stacked high against the wall. I hadn't been in that garage since we moved in. It was Marcus's space, his tools, his rules, but tonight, it was mine. I crossed to the far shelf where an old, dented red toolbox sat beneath a faded military duffel bag. My fingers hesitated on the latch, then opened it slowly. Inside, beneath a pile of screws and old gloves, was the black case I'd hidden months ago. It was my father's. Back when I was 17, he'd given me a crash course in being prepared. Showed me how to document damage after a car accident. How to record conversations with insurance reps who lowballed claims. He'd bought a mini audio recorder, a backup hard drive, even taught me how to hide a camera in plain sight. At the time, I thought he was paranoid. Now I realized he was preparing me for a world I hadn't yet met. I opened the black case and pulled out what I needed: a flash drive, a Ziploc of printed photos, a spiral notebook thick with pages, one tiny audio recorder, still blinking red. I held them in my arms like artifacts, proof that I wasn't crazy, that what had happened to me had happened, that I could walk into any courtroom, any police station, any news outlet, and they'd believe me. Because I had it all. 3 months' worth of documentation, the night he threw my phone against the wall, the day he blocked the door and screamed for an hour, the bruises photographed under neutral light, the diary entries, written while he slept, every date and time noted, the audio of his threats, his gaslighting, his venom masked in quiet tones. I closed the case and walked back into the house. The cold followed me like a cloak. Marcus was still asleep on the couch, one leg hanging over the side, mouth open slightly. I didn't hesitate. I flipped on the overhead light. He blinked, groaned, and slowly sat up. "The hell are you doing?" he mumbled, rubbing his face. I said nothing. I walked to the coffee table, set the items down one by one. Flash drive, photos, recorder, notebook. "What is this?" he asked, voice hoarse, still drunk but sobering quickly. I pressed play on the recorder. Don't make me hurt you, Cassidy. His voice crackling, undeniable. He froze. I opened the notebook and began to read aloud. October 12th, he threw the remote at the wall. Said I was trying to control him. He stood over me for 20 minutes. I couldn't move. His breathing shifted. October 27th, he locked me in the bedroom for 2 hours after I smiled too long at the cashier. I didn't cry. I just stared at the doorknob. Cass, stop. November 4th, he told me no one would believe me, that even if I screamed, no one would come. I believed him. His hands started to shake. I slid the printed photos across the table. One of my arm, one of the cracked phone, one of my back with the faint outline of a bruise through my shirt. Marcus stood, his face pale, lips trembling. Cassidy, I didn't mean to. I was just under pressure. You know how work's been, and you've been cold. I looked up at him, dead in the eye. He fell to his knees, right there on the carpet, in the glow of the cheap floor lamp and the hum of the refrigerator. Please, he whispered. Please don't leave me. Please. I'll change. I'll get help. I'll do therapy. I'll stop drinking. Whatever you want. Just please don't go. I waited. Let the silence settle in again. Let him feel what it was like to speak into the void and get nothing back. Then I bent down, picked up the notebook, and said, I'm not here to talk, Marcus. I walked past him, my voice steady. I'm here to pack. I left at 3 a.m. The house was dark, except for the lamp I left on in the hallway. I didn't bother turning it off. Let it stay lit. Let it witness the moment I stopped asking permission to live. I packed only what mattered, important documents, a few outfits, my laptop, my toothbrush. I slipped my wedding ring into a Ziploc bag and left it on the kitchen counter next to his half-finished beer. He didn't wake up. Or maybe he did, and just knew better than to stop me this time. The sky outside was pitch black, but I didn't feel afraid. I carried no flashlight, no weapon, just resolve, and a duffel bag full of what was left of me. I drove for 40 minutes to Marley Beth's apartment, my knuckles white on the steering wheel, radio off, the road ahead empty. The silence felt different this time, not suffocating, but sacred. She answered the door in sweatpants, barefoot, her eyes widening the second she saw me. I knew it, she whispered, pulling me into a hug. I didn't want to be right, but I knew. I didn't cry. Not yet. She made tea. I sat on her couch and stared at the wall while the kettle whistled. By the time the sun came up, I had already emailed a divorce attorney and attached every file I had. Photos, audio, video, journal entries. I didn't wait. I didn't hesitate. I didn't care if he begged again. I was done. The messages started that morning. First, texts. Where are you? Please talk to me. Cass, I'm sorry. Please just tell me you're okay. Then came the voicemails. Long, rambling. He cried in some, screamed in others, promised everything from rehab to church to couples therapy. I blocked his number. He used another one. I blocked that too. Then came the emails and the gifts delivered to Marley Beth's front door. Roses, chocolate, a necklace I once admired in a shop window. I returned them all unopened. One afternoon, he showed up at my job. I saw him through the front glass window, standing just outside the parking lot, hands shoved deep in his pockets, hair a mess, eyes searching. I called security, and then I filed for a restraining order. The attorney moved quickly. She was a petite woman in her 50s, sharp as glass and cool as marble. She didn't pity me, just respected me. I needed that. You've built a solid case, she said, flipping through my file. He won't see this coming. I nodded. My hands didn't shake anymore when I spoke his name. When the court date arrived, Marcus didn't show. His lawyer emailed mine a week later to say he didn't contest the divorce. Coward. Or maybe he knew he'd already lost long before the paperwork was filed. A month after I left, I visited my father. We met at a diner halfway between his house and my new place. He sat in a booth, sipping coffee, his posture stiff as ever. I slid into the seat across from him, waited. He looked up at me, his eyes narrowing, assessing. You look different, he said finally. I feel different. He nodded slowly, then added, You're strong, stronger than your mother ever was. I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to scream, Why didn't you say something that night? Why didn't you stand up? Another part just sat there, because maybe I'd stopped expecting apologies from men who didn't know how to give them. We ate in silence. When the check came, he paid without asking. We walked to our cars, side by side, not speaking. Just before I opened my door, he said, "I'm glad you're out." That was as close to love as he knew how to say, and maybe for now, it was enough. After the divorce, I changed jobs. Left the marketing firm where Marcus used to pick me up after work and found a position at a nonprofit helping women in crisis. The salary was smaller, but the peace was immeasurable. I rented a one-bedroom apartment near the edge of town. Nothing fancy, creaky floors, tiny kitchen, old tiles in the shower, but it was mine. Every night, I came home and locked the door behind me, not because I feared someone breaking in, but because I knew no one was waiting to explode on the other side. I started therapy. Weekly sessions with a soft-spoken woman named Denise, who never once asked, "Why didn't you leave sooner?" She asked, "When did you stop recognizing yourself?" I still didn't have an answer, but I showed up anyway. Every week. Until my voice didn't tremble when I spoke, until I laughed and didn't feel guilty, until I could say his name without clenching my fists, until I stopped measuring my worth by how quietly I could endure. The nightmares lasted longer than I expected. Sometimes I'd wake up gasping, heart racing, convinced I heard him pounding on the front door. Other nights I'd dream I was back in our old kitchen, trying to explain why the chicken was dry, my voice getting smaller with each word. In those early weeks, I couldn't sit in silence for long. The quiet, once a gift, became a haunted space filled with echoes of things I wished I had said. There were days I felt like I had lost, like I had failed at something women were supposed to be good at, holding it together, loving enough, fixing broken things. I remember folding laundry one afternoon and thinking, I'm a divorcee at 29. What now? But healing, I've learned, is not one loud victory. It's a series of soft choices, little things, like choosing to water your plants even when your hands shake, like deciding to cook a real meal for yourself, even if it's just pasta with jarred sauce, like walking into the grocery store without checking over your shoulder, like waking up and not bracing for a voice that might explode at any second. I started listening to podcasts, women who'd rebuilt their lives, quiet survivors who spoke with a steadiness that made me believe peace was possible. I bought basil seeds and planted them in a chipped ceramic pot on my windowsill. Every morning, I watered them while the kettle boiled. I began to believe in growth again. Slow, stubborn, beautiful. On a whim, I joined a local support group for women recovering from domestic abuse. The first session, I just listened. No one pressed me to share. We sat in a circle, drinking weak coffee, passing tissues, holding space. Eventually, I spoke. Not about Marcus, not at first. I spoke about the girl I used to be, the one who thought love meant staying, enduring, sacrificing everything to keep the peace. The one who thought strength was silence. There was a woman in the group, early 20s, eyes always down. One night, after a meeting, she pulled me aside. She whispered that her boyfriend had thrown her phone into traffic, that she was scared. I told her about Marley Beth's couch, about leaving at 3 a.m., about the garage. 2 weeks later, she left him. I helped her move into a temporary shelter run by the nonprofit I now worked for. I brought her towels, a nightlight, and a box of herbal tea. She cried when I hugged her, not because she was broken, but because she was brave. And sometimes bravery is just stepping into the unknown with nothing but your own 2 feet and a duffel bag. One morning, Denise, the therapist, asked me if I hated Marcus. I thought about it for a long time. No, I said finally. I don't. She nodded, not surprised. I don't hate him, I continued, but I do feel sorry for the woman I used to be. The girl who thought she had to earn kindness. Who thought a man's apology was proof of her value. That grief, I realized, was the deepest. Not for the marriage, not even for the love I thought I'd lost, but for the years I spent shrinking myself just to keep someone else comfortable. But grief is not the end of a story, and neither is survival. Freedom, I've learned, is not something someone else gives you. It's something you take, one small act at a time. I used to think freedom meant someone would save me, I told Denise months later. Now I know. It means saving myself. That truth changed everything. I didn't need revenge. I didn't need him to understand what he'd done. I didn't need an apology from my father. What I needed was this life, this version of myself. This version who wakes up every morning and chooses peace over perfection. Who dances barefoot in the kitchen while her pasta boils, who lights a candle just because. who walks alone at dusk and does not flinch at footsteps behind her. One Saturday afternoon, it rained. Not a storm, just a soft, cleansing drizzle that left everything glistening. I waited until it stopped, then pulled on my coat and walked to the park near my apartment. The trees were still wet, their branches dripping like they just cried something loose. I walked slowly, no destination, just moving, breathing. I passed a little boy splashing in puddles, his mother laughing nearby, a man jogging with a golden retriever, a woman reading under a gazebo, her hair still damp. No one looked at me. No one needed me. No one hurt me. And I didn't need to explain myself to anyone. I reached the edge of the pond, where ducks floated lazily, the surface rippling with light. And I thought, maybe no one came to save me that night. But I came back for myself. And that was enough. Thank you for being here with me through all of this. If any part of this story touched you, if you've ever felt unseen, unheard, or unworthy, know this. You are not alone, and you don't have to wait for anyone to save you. Have you ever had a moment where you realized your strength came from walking away, not holding on? I'd love to hear your story. Share it in the comments below. Let's hold space for one another. Please consider liking this video, subscribing to the channel, and sharing it with someone who might need to hear it. Thank you truly for listening. Wishing you peace, freedom, and the soft strength to begin again.